You're listening to The Great and Secret Knowledge, a speculative fiction podcast. I'm Jeff, and with me, Sofia. How are you, Sofia?
Hello. I'm good. How are you doing?
Howdy. It's a pretty good week. Played some Dungeons and Dragons last night. That was fun. Saw my parents. Played some Scrabble with them. Been watching a lot of Doctor Who and Star Trek, as usual. Anything exciting going on your end?
There are many things, but I don't know. I'm planning a bike carnival that's going to be taking place in September, so we have much time still, but it's fun to get it started.
A bike carnival. What's that like?
It's going to be like the idea is that it is as a carnival, but then it was with bicycles. So then you ride the bicycles around the city. And then we have this carnival area where we have different bike activities and also some carnival, general carnival activities. So it's fun. It's a lot of celebration of bicycles.
That's cool. That sounds like fun. Spring has sprung. We're finally back into it. All the pretty birds, blossoms. At D&D last night, my friend took me out into his yard to see all his beautiful blooming flowers. He was really excited.
We don't have any flowers here yet. It's totally gray still.
Well. So we are tackling Star Trek: The Next Generation. So I thought I'd ask you what you think you know about Star Trek before you started watching this.
Yeah. When we talked about what to cover next, I thought it could be fun to cover Star Trek because I have not really seen anything. I've seen the latest movies, at least two of them. You know, the ones that were, when was it now? Was it something like 10 years ago? I don't know.
Yeah, Star Trek 2009, and then the really bad one, Into Darkness, and then Star Trek Beyond was, maybe 2015, somewhere in there.
Yeah, so I've seen those, and then all the other stuff I know is really only from references. I've not seen anything else. And I have been a little bit interested in watching, but I've also been like, oh, maybe it's too dated, or, it's going to be too much. Sometimes when things are very popular at a time, then they will be referenced in other things. And then when you go back and you watch something, and then it feels very unoriginal because other things have copied it. So
yes. Oh, yes. That's kind of the problem Dune has sometimes. Like so many things are based on it that are action-packed and pacey and like full of deep character moments. And then you come to Dune and it's like sand dunes, like clan political struggles,
Yeah, sometimes it can feel like it's been done better afterwards because someone streamlined it and picked up some parts and all this. So because of that, I felt like maybe I wouldn't enjoy it. But then I thought it's still interesting to watch it and to see. And also if I come from it knowing this, that maybe I would appreciate it even so. And I think also previously I was more concerned with the visuals, that I would feel like I would be too taken out of it if the visuals were too different from what I was used to. It's like the effects and stuff have really progressed a lot.
Yeah, I know some of these things have been updated for present versions, so I don't know how much looks better now than it used to.
Oh, that I don't really like that. We should know what is the official, the original. Now I feel like I will be confused.
I know that Netflix remastered it. I don't know if Prime, which is where I'm watching it, uses that same version. So I don't know. It'd be fun to have them side by side and see, like, from a DVD or something, and see like what they upgraded.
Maybe you could play them screen by screen next to each other, and then you'll have to be like the wiki and be like, this scene was updated. But what I think it's fine if they just upgraded the colors or something, but I don't like the idea if they upgraded the visual effects. I think that seems unfair. It's like trying to redo something.
Yeah. I don't mind it if it looks good and seamlessly integrates into the story. Like the creatures at the end of this, for example, look incredible. So if that was done with puppets, like, that's pretty awesome, right? Or hand-drawn cell animation. But if it was done with computers, it's like, well, that's fine, but I would have liked to see the original.
Yeah, I think it's more for this coverage that I feel like it is interesting to know what they could do at this time and to talk about it in terms of how it was made originally. So,
yeah.
But I will, I don't know, I was going to say I will just keep it in mind, but maybe that would be too distracting. Maybe you can look up and to see if you can find any info about in future episodes, if they have redone it or if it's the same.
Yeah. Oh, so since you saw those more recent movies, did you remember anything from them in the context of this one, whether it's the tech or the characters or the uniforms?
It's not the same characters as far as I can tell. I didn't recognize any. I think those are from the original in the recent movies. So what I know is mostly through just general knowledge. That is more than the movies. I feel like when I watched the movies, I knew everything, all the general knowledge that those provided. But maybe I will have some misconceptions because I've watched those. Maybe they are introducing weird things or something. But no, I think that it's more that you see a lot of Star Trek info online and you know a lot about, for example, if I listen to a podcast and they talk about how, like the character of Data, I know that character because I have been told about, analysis that has been done. Is it a he or a they? I don't know. What do people call or it?
He's a he.
He has a he gender. Like for example, I remember listening to a podcast fairly recently when they mentioned this character, and then I knew, when I went into this, I knew this context. So, but other than that, I'm trying to think of anything else in general that I know, but no.
Like transporter beams, phasers, the warp core. I'm thinking of things that they have in common. Ensigns and lieutenants and, naval stuff. There's no Vulcans in this one. Like Spock.
Never? Or just in this episode?
Just this episode. McCoy does mention Vulcans and androids when he's talking to Data.
That's true.
Cool. Well, so that's fun.
And what about you? You should also give your context.
My Star Trek journey.
Yes.
So when I was let's say 10 or 11, Fox Channel started, and it had The Simpsons. Well, it had the Tracy Ullman Show, and then The Simpsons came out of that. And it had Star Trek: The Next Generation. It was like a channel that played a lot of syndicated shows. So it had Star Trek, and I would catch it here and there. But then when we moved to the new house and I was about 12, my brother was like religious. Like we always had to watch it. And it was fine, but I didn't like my brother very much. So if he liked something, I tended to like do something else. So it wasn't until 2015 or 16 that I started listening to the podcast, The Greatest Generation, in which they cover all the shows, but they started with The Next Generation episode by episode. And that's when I started watching it all the time. And now I've seen most everything that's been on TV. I've seen all but maybe one of the movies. Yeah, I'm pretty much a fan. I've read the comics now. I picked up some comic books. I bought a few like paperback books. Like I'm sort of like that midway point between a completist and a super fan. Whereas with Doctor Who, I've just become a super fan and read everything they make and stuff. As for
Wait,
the
what
movies,
is the most advanced? Is it completist or a super fan?
Oh, the super fan. I think a completist in terms of the TV episodes. Yeah. As a Doctor Who super fan, I bought a few toys and I went to a convention, stuff like that, like extra stuff that only other fans would know about.
Yeah, so you also came to it later. So it wasn't like you just saw it as, that you were a fan as a small child, or, because it could have been that you were just like, I don't even know when I first watched it. I just watched it from when I was a baby.
I was really into the original series with Captain Kirk and Spock and Bones McCoy. So those movies were interesting to me, but they weren't those original guys, so it like didn't quite do the same thing.
So it wasn't your first Star Trek, it's just this version of it. You came to it later.
Yeah. Yeah, my brother was like super into Picard and Wesley and Data and all this, and I was more into Kirk and Bones. I think I've seen all those episodes several times. Definitely the movies. The Voyage Home I saw in the theater as a youngster. It was the one where they have to go back in time to save the whales, to stop this giant alien probe from destroying the Earth. That's
which year was
still
that
my
up?
favorite. 1985, 84. The Voyage Home. 86. So I would have been 9. 9 or 10.
I was gonna say that I was also not that into TV when I was little, and I think it's because we only had 3 channels. We didn't have any of the extra channels, so I didn't have that many shows. I don't even know if Star Trek was on those channels, but if it had been, I might have not liked, because I was like a sensitive child, so easily scared. I remember watching on some episode. I don't even know if this is scary, but I was like, when I was little, I watched this episode when they were in space, and there was some kind of infant that was it had just been born, and it was in this, I don't know, like it was in this medical room, and they had some kind of problem with the ship or something. They were like, "Oh, this baby's gonna die," and it's like so scary. I was like, "Oh, I don't want to watch these space shows with babies dying."
I wonder if those were the Borg babies. They come across a Borg baby in a future episode, I
Yeah, it
think.
could have been. I don't know. It was just laying there in some kind of weird alien, like it was not an alien, but like this kind of very technological setup, and it was just like all by itself in this techno stuff, and it was scary to me. So then maybe I was turned off by this.
There are a surprising number of babies in Star Trek episodes. There's one that has little horns because she's like half human, half, I don't know, dragon person. Yeah. There's one where Clint Howard was Ron Howard's brother, played a little baby who was also a god or a super powerful alien. That was fun. Yeah, it's funny the things that scare us when we're kids that we just avoid forever. I was that way with the X-Files. Like, just too scary. Oh, there's an episode of the original series with evil children. Talk about scary. Oh, yeah. I think it's called Miri. Yeah, that's a good one. They call old people grups in their society. When people turn 18, they become just like mindless raving zombies. And so the kids like don't trust Captain Kirk because he's a grup. Well, anyway, I guess that's our Star Trek journeys.
Yeah.
If I was to be forced to pick a favorite Star Trek series, I think it would be Voyager, because I love Captain Janeway and all those silly adventures. They're like trapped out in the depths of the galaxy trying to get home. But I've seen all the Kurtzman era Trek. Those started around 2016. I've seen all those shows since they started coming out. Like Discovery and Lower Decks, Prodigy, Picard. I think that's it. They're coming out with Starfleet Academy soon. But yeah, it's fun when you're on the ground floor of a new thing. I think that's what excited my brother so much, that he was kind of like Wesley on this ship, like getting to see it for the first time. We'll talk about it when we get there, but the look Wesley has on his face when he sees the bridge for the first time, apparently that was just how Will Wheaton reacted when he got onto the set, and they kept all of that.
That's fun. Yeah, there was one of the things that I was thinking about, if we're gonna jump into it a little bit, that
Sure.
Since I didn't know anything about who is, I know that Will Wheaton was on Star Trek, but I didn't know which one. So then when I saw the title sequence, I was like, wait, how, like, he's too young to be in this. And then I was like, oh, he's a child, that's why. I was like surprised by that.
Oh, yeah. Good old Wes. Well, there is one thing, the theme song is pretty similar to the original in terms of the bones of it, but it's like all dressed up and super symphonic and everything. And they kept the opening narration. I thought I'd play that. They just changed one word.
These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its continuing mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before.
Well, that's that. That was fun.
Yeah. I like the title music.
So they changed from where no man has gone before to no one. I remember that being an interesting change. The 60s were very not feminist. Like Gene Roddenberry and the production team did their best to advance the state of things. You know, it was a pretty progressive show, even communistic at times, but clearly we advanced a little bit in the intervening 20 odd years between that show's airing.
I can imagine also having, even if you have good intentions, you will have blind spots probably that is more visible in hindsight. But I like the music. I think it's fun that these older shows, they have much more of this, what do you call it, like the trumpets and horns and stuff. I think it's fun. And then I like that they have the title sequence. That's also fun. It feels very classic.
Yeah, whipping around all those planets and stuff. The ship model looks incredible. Again, it's a little hard for me to comment because I didn't watch it on airing, or I didn't watch it closely when it was out. So I'm not sure which effects are new. Like, are the planets all like, did they look this awesome? You know, did the whooshing of the ship look the same? All that stuff. But it's just lit beautifully. I like the little, like, it says the name Enterprise in tiny letters on the like neck part where the ship meets, and then later when the saucer opens up, you can see the Enterprise inside the where they join together. Like, just beautiful little details. Now most every effect is done on computers. It's hard to imagine this like incredible intricacy. Like, how many people worked on that model? Was it just one person, you know, like obsessively painting in little windows and things? So once the theme is done, we get into the title of this thing. It's called Encounter at Farpoint. Did you know any of these actors from before you saw this show? Most of them don't do a lot outside of Star Trek, so I wondered if you'd seen any of these folks around.
The only one that I recognize is Patrick Stewart. And it was very funny to see him in this role because I, of course, know him as Professor X. And he seemed very different in this one, but maybe he will change. Maybe this is like his start, and maybe he will be different later. But I thought it was very funny that he hates children. I hope that stays for the whole show. And he's just like hating children.
It's very odd. It's just the way it's written is odd. It's like, I get it. I don't necessarily vibe with children and wouldn't necessarily want them in my workplace. Like, but the way he says it to Riker is like, I want you to be sure that I come across as like friendly or whatever. So wild. What was that quote?
Yeah, it is. And so I was going to say that is part of them when Riker talks about how, or they talk about his previous service where he was protecting the captain, you know, from doing something that might have got him killed. And then Picard is just like responding like, oh, also you have to protect me from being mean to children. And then it's just like, you don't have to protect me from dying. And I think just like protect my image. So yeah, I agree. It was like a little bit of a weird, but I think maybe for me, I guess I saw it as some kind of character moment. So I wasn't sure if it was a weird thing for him to say or if he always would say these things, like if it's just him that is weird.
In a future series, we see him talk about how Starfleet became his family, that family never really worked for him. And then in that same series, we find out that he actually has had a son this whole time.
Oh, really? Now you're doing me all the spoilers. Like, you don't want me to...
It's nothing for this series. It's
okay.
like, you know, 30 years down the road. And in one of the movies, he has a clone that some enemy made. So I don't know if that's considered a son or a brother or neither. But anyway, family traditionally wasn't all that important to him. So no wonder he's like, yeah, I might be rude to kids. I mean, what does he expect Riker to do? Like, Captain, you're being a dick.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what he's thinking. He's gonna protest if he does something that is being too rude. But for your question about who I recognize, I didn't really recognize Will Wheaton, but I realized that was him because he was a tiny child. And then I was none other. Of course, I recognize the guy that is blind because he's the meme guy, but I don't know this actor. So I just saw that he was the meme.
LeVar Burton. Yeah, he played Kunta Kinte in Roots, which is a TV movie from the States about...
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I've read the book.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Alex Haley, the guy's born a slave, and yeah, all that. And then for the longest time, he was most well known as the host of Reading Rainbow, which is a public broadcasting show that gets kids interested in reading. And his, maybe I'll drop in a soundbite, his sort of quote he would say after talking about a book, he'd say, "But you don't have to take my word for it." And then he'd throw it to kids to review the book.
But you don't have to take my word for it.
But yeah, it was fun to see. I mean, to see a black man in a major role, and not just one, but two, with Michael Dorn playing the Klingon, was cutting edge, groundbreaking. To see a disabled person so capable and valued on the ship, and he talks. I think he even talks about how the visor works in this one a little bit. He can see different spectrums.
Yeah, he does. But he says that he has some pain using it.
Yes, that was interesting.
But I don't understand. Is he in pain, do you think, when he's using it or all the time? I wasn't totally sure about that.
Yeah, it sounded as if it's all the time, but he doesn't want to take painkillers because it will somehow lessen the effectiveness of the interface.
Yeah, I think that at least the ones that were available, like he would have to do some kind of surgery, it seemed like, or he would have to, I think the options that he brought up was either you could not wear it or you could do some kind of brain surgery. So he was saying that neither was an option for him.
Yeah, he said something funny during that scene. I wanted to play it.
And you felt all the years that you've used this?
They say it's because I use my natural sensors in different ways.
Did you catch that? He said sensors.
Oh, I don't get it. Sorry.
Well, normally we say sensors, but Spock, the Leonard Nimoy played Spock, in the 60s, and I think he said sensors to sound alien. And so I think early on in The Next Generation, they were trying to decide, should we do that or not? And so Geordi, who's just a regular human, says it, and it sounds ridiculous. So I think they stopped doing that for the most part.
I didn't think about that since I didn't know this. But that makes me actually think about this, is that I wasn't sure who was human or not, because we are introduced to some different characters, and I'm sure you will be able to tell me their names and stuff, and I will be able to pick it up eventually. But there is this blonde woman, and she talks as if maybe she's not from Earth, but it's a little bit unclear. She talks about how she's from some kind of other society, but it could, I suppose, be a human colony that she was, that just broke out. And I don't know that you need to tell me. I think it's more that it's like, this is what I know so far. But it depends on what setup you want, because it could be a little bit fun if I don't know, and I will figure it out as we go.
Right. Yeah. So all I'll say lore-wise is just that we didn't get warp travel immediately. So before they got warp travel, there were generation ships, like colony ships that seeded different worlds. So there are humans like on tons of different planets that aren't necessarily part of the Federation.
Ah, okay.
But Star Trek confuses it because sometimes they have aliens that aren't human that look exactly like humans. For example, in this episode, the Bandy, I think they're called the Bandy or Bondi. They just have like, I don't know, lace doilies on their head. So we're supposed to think they're not human.
Yeah, that's true. That is a little bit unclear then who, like you said, who is human and not. But I think I expected that because there is one of those. It's a little bit. It's hard to know, how alien to make different characters, because it can be, for one, it's like you have the technological limitations, but also that it can also be a little bit distracting, if everyone is having, you still want them to have some kind of similar facial features. It's not fun if everyone is just like a blob or something. Like you want them to be recognizable in some sense. So I suppose you can have different skin colors, like that are not our colors, but usually they don't go that far, I feel like, from human, unless it's more of an animal looking, if you look at different shows and movies.
It's historically, it's just a part of sci-fi and fantasy is like, how relatable is it versus how imaginative? And there's like a sweet spot, and it's always changing, how much weirdness are people willing to tolerate?
Yeah.
I think Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy can be weirder because it's a comedy, but if it's a more straight story, you want to ground it in things that people will recognize. So you don't want too many sci-fi words in a scene. A super intelligent shade of the color blue. you don't want in every episode.
No. And I think it's also more limitations in a TV series in some sense, because in a book you can describe something and you can make it make sense from the character's point of view. For example, there are some weird books like A Deepness in the Sky, where there's like all these spider people, and it's very the way that they are described, it's from the spider's point of view. So they are not. So they can interpret everything. But imagine if you try to film that, it would be very difficult to show all of the spiders and be like, this spider is sad, and you wouldn't even know.
Yeah, how do you tell if a spider is sad?
Yeah. And then, but on the other hand, in books, there can be some limitations about how alien the mind could be, because you could have something that has a very strange body, but if it's too alien in the mind, then it's also not relatable. If it has totally different conceptions, and then it becomes pretty meaningless. So there's some limitations, like you said. And also like how similar should you make the values, our values, and how similar should you make the technology that we can understand it? So that can be tricky. I mean, imagine if like a medieval person came to our society, they would think that it was some kind of hellscape, I guess, because they would just be like, what is this? This is so ridiculous. And then if we look that far ahead, then it would be incomprehensible for us, maybe.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of that with the newest seasons of Discovery and next Starfleet Academy, is that 1,000 years in the future, like tech, there could be all this integrated tech in the body and in their eyes and stuff that we don't know is happening. like they get little contact lenses, so their scanning device is in their eye. So they have some virtual interfaces or whatever, but some of the stuff just looks like it's happening telepathically. Like they have personal transporters, and it's like they didn't have to punch in any buttons on their wrist or say anything. They're just whoop there. So yeah, too far can get a little magical or alienating sometimes.
Yeah. Maybe we could jump from that to talking about this ship, how it is set up, like what is the technology portrayed in this one? Because I was thinking about, I think the general setup, because I think that in more modern sci-fi, I feel like a lot of times it's made to look very technical and engineered, like everything is kind of like as if it was done just for practical purposes. There's a lot of like blue lighting, and a lot of the time at this in the shows and movies I watched. And I think that I like in this one that it feels a little bit more like it's designed, I guess, and maybe that's just because of how the conceptions of the future changes, but it was not as stark as some of the other shows that I've seen.
Part of that design decision, I think, is related to the difference of the mission. So in the original series, it was a 5-year mission, deep space exploration. And in this one, it's like a 20-year mission of that plus all this other stuff, diplomacy and ferrying people and war. I mean, imagine putting 100, 300 families on a warship. Like, that's what they've done here. So it has to be like comfortable for parents and kids, which is probably why the hallways look a little bit like, I don't know, a hotel or something.
Yeah.
I looked at the trivia. Apparently, one design idea was to have potted plants on the bridge. Luckily, they didn't go that far.
I could see. I mean, I think if it was an actual future, it would make sense to have it. But I agree, it could be a little bit distracting if the idea is that it's like all action and stuff, and maybe a little weird to have it.
They're in the middle of a fight. They rush onto the bridge and they like brush a creeping vine out of their face or something.
Yeah. I mean, but if you're expecting to fight, like why are you bringing all these families along? I feel like you have to choose a vibe. Maybe you could have it be like, oh, it's going to be fine. And then you're just like, oh no, why did we have all these potted plants on the bridge? We didn't know it was a bit this much fighting.
Now, in this episode, there's that wild, long scene of them separating the saucer section.
Mm.
And they set it up at the beginning by having them meet up. But that was purely so they had an excuse to like rescue the women and children, the civilians, by sending the saucer away, and the rest of the ship becomes just a warship.
Yeah.
So they can kind of explain it away, but there are times where they are in some life and death, totally bananas stuff, and they don't separate the saucer, and you're just thinking like, I guess we're just endangering children this episode.
Yeah, maybe it would be boring to separate it every time. We just be like, okay,
yeah. Well,
move it
plus
here.
expensive. Back then, every time that was a model shot. So either you're just repeating the same shots, which viewers would probably get bored with, or you have to do a whole nother shoot.
Yeah. And at first I thought you meant that it was expensive in the Star Trek universe, like, oh, we need to use all this specific equipment. It's going to wear out. We can only separate 20 times, and then we have to, change out these bulbs or something.
So you mentioned money, and this is a critical part of Star Trek and why Star Trek has an enduring legacy and is like the Star Trek universe is an attractive place for us to escape to.
It's like post-scarcity.
Post-scarcity, exactly. So there was some of this in the original Star Trek, like humans are more enlightened now and they're less prone to violence and they don't need money. And it was stepped up with the advent of replicator technology, which we have in this show. I don't know if they highlighted in this episode, but the thing down on the planet can create apples, for example. It's kind of like that everywhere in the Star Trek, in the Federation.
But why are they so confused about them creating the apples then, if that is normal? Because Riker is just like, oh, where did these apples come from?
Because it was telepathic. He didn't order it. Like, you have to ask the computer, you know, chocolate sundae, and then it'll create it. I think it was that, how did it know I wanted that?
But that seems like such a small step. Is it that you can only do it on the ship, or it has to be maybe it has to be a specific machine that it's made in? It can't just appear at any place.
Yeah. Or in the holodeck, I think Riker or Data talks about how the holodeck isn't just images; it's creating the trees and the plants and the rocks.
Yeah, and I guess we'd have to see in the future if you can do it while someone is in there, because it could also be that it has to be done, you know, in a specific container. So you can't just have a person and then they just create this stuff on them or next to them.
There is an episode of The Next Generation where an electronic life form called the exocomp has a replicator in its face so it can create all these different devices. But that's probably the only example of mobile replicators we get. I think they're supposed to like use a lot of power and like have a lot of mass to them.
Yeah. And I wonder, it would be funny though, because you talked about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that it would be funny to have some kind of sketch like that where they are in the ship and then they have this replicator that can create something at any time, but then it's like not good at following orders, so it just like creates all this ice cream on your face or something. Or it gets too literal. If you say something that might be taken as an order, then it's like replicates that, and so it becomes like literally doing everything that you.
There is an episode of Star Trek Lower Decks. I think it's the first episode where Boimler can't get it to work and it's just spitting out hot bananas. Yeah, that's a good idea. A replicator that goes rogue.
But do you think, does it use any kind of material, or is it really just creating things from nothing?
We get little hints. There's something called an input feed, I think, that sends in the molecules that it then creates from. But it doesn't say that there's like a container in the ship somewhere full of, you know, base atoms, like it
from the poop.
Yeah, I assume it's from human waste, whatever random stuff they recycle. On the Greatest Generation podcast, they say that your poops get absorbed when you transport somewhere. Or they just take them right out of you instead of having to go to the bathroom.
Good question.
I do wonder, though, if a thing took the poop out of you, would not using your sphincter be bad biologically? I don't know. These are the things I think about.
Yeah, I think that would be a problem. There should be an episode when they're like, oh, you got colon cancer. You didn't poop enough.
Like, yeah, and they go on an away mission without it. Like, there's no transporters. And they're like, I need to poop, but it's not working. It's a TV show, so that never happens.
No one poops in TV shows.
Yeah, the other part of post-scarcity is the transporter. You don't have to pay to travel. So, like, you could just be like, hey, I want to see that beautiful landmark that would take me hours to drive to, and I'd have to stop at a campsite, and I'd have to buy chips at the gas station or whatever. It completely changes the economy because you could just go to the coolest spots anytime you feel like it. So it really would unify the planet in a sense, because everywhere you go, there'd be other tourists from all over the world. You'd start to like, there's also translators, so you can all speak the same language. So it really does create a sort of utopian society, at least for humans, because anywhere they go in the Federation, they have more in common than different. So even if they come from a very different cultural context, like Tasha Yar, for example, the security chief.
Which one is that? Is she with the blonde hair?
The blonde woman, yeah. Denise Crosby plays her.
Mm.
The one who gets frozen.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that scene is messed up.
It's funny that they can unfreeze them. But I guess, if there's so future technology, maybe there's ways to... she's not literally frozen as in, being super cold. There could be other things to it.
Yeah, it's medical stuff is a little squishy in this show. All we really know is that it's very, very good. So, like they can patch up stab wounds like it's nothing. So they unfreeze people apparently, and it's fine. We never see that ops guy ever again, the one that gets frozen on the bridge. But apparently he's
maybe
fine.
he died from complications.
Torres. Maybe there's a book. I'll look for it. See what happens to unfrozen Torres.
Yeah. But I was just going to say, comment a little bit on what you said before also about the family, since that was surprising, because I think that the way we think about ship missions in our day is that it is something where you don't bring families because the space is limited, I suppose. And of course the danger and such. But even if there was no danger, you wouldn't really bring, because you wouldn't want to use all that space for that. But I like it. It's like an interesting dynamic where people have their families, and it's more great, makes for some more drama.
Yeah, another way the show makes it safer for families is they have gravity plating, so you don't have to do all sorts of like 0G training to get around the ship. They have force fields, so even if there's a dangerous thing happening, they can hunker down in their quarters and be protected. Again, the medical care is really good. So it's like, it's still odd to have families on a warship, but they've given themselves little ways to make it less unbelievable. I love that moment where Tasha gets frozen. I wanted to play a little sound drop.
You barbarian!
Troy. Can we talk about Troy? I love her so much. She's the lady with the curly black hair, mini skirt.
I call her the psychic in my notes.
The psychic, yes. She's from Beta Z. Is her planet. She has black
Is she
contact
human
lenses. No.
No, she was half human, right?
She's half human, right? She said her dad was a Starfleet officer. And full Betazoids have telepathy, or like they can telepathically enter people's minds, which they do a lot with, because a character comes on the show at some point, or a guest character who's a full Betazoid, so we see some of that. But yeah, the only way that we know she's not human is the black contact lenses, apparently. And her emotional reactions.
But she does talk to Riker in her mind. And I guess the idea is that she taught him somehow so that they could talk without.
Right. That is a wild scene. Like, the look on his face is hard to parse. It's almost like he's like, I didn't know you were going to be on this ship. And to me, that's a little unbelievable. Like, if you're going to be a first officer on a ship, surely you've looked over the roster. But maybe he's just like still so in love with her that he always reacts that way when he sees her. But yeah, clearly they have some bond that enables her to telepathically communicate with him.
Yeah. Some other people that we meet is the Data character, and I was
yes.
surprised because I knew of this character, but I didn't know he would look human. So I was like, oh, okay, it's him. I thought maybe he would be looking like a robot much more.
Yeah. What other android characters have we seen? We've seen like Blade Runner, where they look just like regular humans. Daniil from iRobot, who looks not like normal humans.
There's a show called Äkta Människor, which has very human-looking androids, and the one of the things that is funny in that one is that people get very attracted to them, and then they are like, "No, this is a robot. It's not allowed." You know, it's like a taboo.
That sounds good. I want to check that out. Yeah. So he's very human. Originally, he was supposed to have been made by aliens, but they changed it last minute. Eventually, we find out who built him and why he's got gold skin and stuff. They fill in some of that lore.
Oh, yeah, because they talk a little bit about how it seems like there's some prejudice against androids, that he's used to some people being bothered. And I think it's interesting. This is the one that I listened to a podcast about it. I think it was in Imaginary Worlds, something, or some podcast like it. They talked a little bit about this character, and they said that, and this is where introduced to this in this first episode, but he says that he wants to be human, you know, even though he views, does it say robot or android? I feel like he's call himself
Android.
Maybe. Oh, okay. So he views like himself as superior in many ways as being an android, but still he wants to be human.
That is one of my favorite scenes of this episode, is when Riker enters the holodeck. It's just gorgeous. Like the arch sits in the middle of the jungle and then like fades away. He's like looking off frame, which gives us the sense that it's this vast space. And then Data's up there whistling badly. I got a little quote here.
Marvelous.
Apparently Data is a little more emotive in season 1. Like he's got little smiles and little like things that he does less of later on. So people's headcanon is that he was trying to imitate human emotion more, and then eventually he settled into his character.
Yeah, that makes sense as a headcanon.
But that moment where Riker's like, he is kind of afraid of working with a machine. Did you catch that little bit?
He asks him, right? He asks if he's concerned, and that's what I meant, that people have some prejudice.
Yeah, and Riker's like, well, yeah, I'm troubled. They don't really get into it in this episode, but yeah, the idea that this super strong thing, if it decided it didn't care about humans anymore, like it could take over the entire ship, lay waste to everyone. I think one of the things he says is he's been in Starfleet for 20 years, almost as if he's saying, look, man, I've been working with people. I haven't turned on them yet. It'll be fine.
Yeah, that could be. But I was thinking about this as the way that it's portrayed with this character, that they are wanting to be human. I feel like this is maybe probably more common in older shows like this one, where now in our current time, I think it's much more common to have different non-human characters being like, oh, I don't want to be human. Like, why? What is so great about being human? Well, in this one, it's a little bit more like it's just assumed, you know, that, oh, of course, this character would want to be human for some reason, you
know. Have you been watching, is it called Paragon on Netflix?
No, haven't heard of it.
It's the Ken Liu series based on his short story collection, Pantheon.
Pantheon. No, I haven't, but I know of it.
So it's got a mix of AIs and uploaded intelligences, which are humans that, and there's this whole tension of like, will post-humans care about humans at all? Or because they can think so fast, they live 1,000 lives for our one kind of thing. And they'd evolve completely out of pocket and not care about us anymore. I think that comes out of what we're seeing, which is that AI do whatever their programmers want them to. And so they're as capitalistic and shitty as all of us, kind of.
There's older times. Like, I don't think that idea is presently. There are many stories of runaway AIs or runaway robots, that does something. I think that comes more from the history of slavery. This idea that the slave is gonna rebel and will. I think it's a little bit more like that, or in general, just the fear of like oppressed persons turning on their masters.
The first appearance of the word robot in literature is R.U.R. Rossum's Universal Robots by somebody whose name I've forgotten. And in that, it is absolutely a slavery allegory.
Yeah.
Oh, by Karl Čapek, Czech writer. Science fiction play. Very cool. If you haven't read that, check it out, listener.
Yeah, and what I was thinking about with this, the other version of being not wanting to be human is more that just being okay with being dehumanized, I suppose. Do you know the concept of void punk? That is the idea is that if you're like a person that maybe feels dehumanized by society, instead of trying to be like, okay, like I am human, or trying to justify yourself, you're just like, okay, what if I'm not human? Then you don't really have to defend yourself or to prove that you're human. You can just be like, okay, I will just reclaim like dehumanization, and I will. So that's why, for example, maybe someone is. One of the reasons person could be using like the it pronoun, or to use like this kind of language that is meant to dehumanize.
Interesting. Yeah, this is a huge, honestly, species is introduced in this series that then carries throughout all of future Star Trek, that explores that tension. There's even a film where this species interacts with Data, and they're like, why do you want to be like humans? They're crap. And he's like, well, it's just how I am, or whatever. And so, there's really interesting where those philosophies come into conflict, and they try to lure Data to the dark side, kind of thing.
So right now we have been talking for about an hour. And I wonder, maybe we shouldn't try to talk about all of the plot. Maybe it's more interesting to talk about like what we found most interesting about the episode in general, because people.
Sure, yeah. I would start with Dr. Crusher and Wes. I think I had a crush on Dr. Crusher as a youth. I just think she's great. She's such a good mom. She's very competent. She has some interesting thing going on with Captain Picard. Like that moment where he asks if she wants to leave the ship almost seemed to me like it wasn't really about her dead husband, but that he has a crush on her and like doesn't want her to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I was even thinking like, oh, did they have sleep together before? But then I was like, no, she had a dead husband. This show will not do that because it's too moral. I think it was more in a modern time, maybe to be like, oh, we also had sex, like while the husband was alive or something. Or, it could even be like, oh, this is his child, this boy, you know. But it's some kind of a weird
That's an
drama
interesting
there.
idea. He says, winking to camera.
Yeah, but I also got this idea that there was some history between them, but it could just be the straightforward reason that, you know, his employer, no, wait, how would you say it? His underling was like killed, and then he feels responsible for this person's family, and therefore he feels like some kind of relation to them. But that is like, I think that is more common in that time because of the idea that, or maybe it's just different cultures, because like in Sweden, people would not really feel that way, that they had any kind of relation with a co-worker's family, you know, or even if it's like an employee, you know, and they were the boss.
So they kind of keep the personal and the professional separate.
Yeah, but I think that maybe there is different in this culture, you know, like I've seen in books and such where people invite their boss over for dinner, you know, to meet their family or something. So maybe there would be another type of relationship where you actually have some kind of, the family is more of an extension maybe of the person somehow.
That was really common in shows in the 50s and 60s, like Bewitched, where Darren's annoying boss, Mr. Tate, comes over, or I Dream of Jeannie. Also, Japanese culture in the 80s and 90s, I think that was really common. I don't know if that's changed. Trying to get your family to behave properly to impress the boss. Wes's first impression for Picard is being totally wet, and he's like, should I get a towel? And he's like, yeah. And then Wes is talking to his mom later. I have a quote here.
Are you afraid of the captain too?
I certainly am not.
Yeah, I just love Dr. Crusher because she doesn't have any time for that kind of nonsense. You know, she seems on the equal level with the captain, which was a dynamic in the original Star Trek. Kirk and Bones were like pretty, like really good friends, and the Doctor is the only one that can override a captain's order, and only under certain circumstances, like medical circumstances.
I thought that the first officer could do that. That was the one they talked about. But I guess it's not the same. Maybe the idea is that the first officer should only protect the captain themselves, but the captain can do all other orders for other people in the ship and such.
Yeah, it's common in naval stories for the first officer has to like do a mutiny because the captain's like nuts or has an alien in his body or whatever. But for the Doctor, it's they just speak their mind freely, however they like, and the captain just has to accept it. So I think that's what they were making that clear early on, that she's not overawed by his powerful personality.
That's true.
It's really cute in that moment because he's like, "Can I go on the bridge, Mom? Can I?" And she's like, ugh, she just melts and does what he wants. And then when he's on the bridge and Picard's like, "But don't touch anything." And then he immediately goes and touches something.
Yeah.
That totally reminded me of how my brother behaved as a 15-year-old.
Yeah. So I suppose one big thing that we haven't talked about is the Q guy that shows up.
Q, the antagonist. This guy wasn't originally intended to be on the show, like in the episode. Roddenberry just wanted a 1-hour episode about Farpoint Station. That was the original pitch. And Paramount was like, no, we want to make it like a TV movie, an hour and a half. And so they added in this Q story, and Q ended up being so popular and having being the catalyst for so many strange and interesting stories that he came back many times.
Yeah, because I remember, or not remember, but I recognized his name at least, but I don't know that much about him. But when he first showed up, I thought maybe he was a pirate, and I was very excited. I thought it was a space pirate.
Oh man, a space pirate that could just zap into your bridge, that would be hard to fight.
Yeah, it makes more sense that he was playing dress up. I don't know why there would be pirates dressed like that, but it would be funny if it was just like a group of pirates and he was just like zapping in. And I wasn't sure, how maybe this is something that everyone could do, that since they have the teleporters, maybe it's more like knocking on the door, just like show up like, hello, so I wasn't sure how serious this was that he turned up on the bridge.
Yeah, that somebody teleporting onto the bridge is usually a signal in Star Trek that they're more powerful than you. In the newest Star Trek, they can do it as long as the shields are down. But if the shields are up, they shouldn't be able to. I love how he appears in his conquistador outfit and he goes, "Thou art notified that thy kind hath infiltrated the galaxy too far already." And we learn that he's behind that field. That field looks so badass. I don't remember it looking that badass. That must be remastered.
Yeah, maybe I had the original then because I thought it just looked like some kind of Tetris game.
I'd love to. Maybe we could share a screen at some point. I'd love to see.
Yeah, we should do some kind of screenshots. But I wasn't totally sure
so powerful.
I wasn't totally sure what Q's complaint was. He was not very clear, and no one was trying to. I felt like they were all being too aggressive. They should have been like, "Wait, please explain. What is your complaint? What do you want us to do? Why are you here?" And they were just fighting. And I was like a little bit confused about what specifically he wanted from them. He was just like accusing them of stuff and insulting them. But, he wanted them to leave this region of space, but also he was trying to trap them. I was unsure.
Yeah. It's Picard. I think the problem is Picard has too many things to consider. Like, he has to protect all those families on the ship, right? So he can't get this alien too worked up. The first thing the alien does is freeze Torres, so he can't risk any of his people dying. So he kind of has this weird, antagonistic sort of get off my bridge thing, instead of going carefully, like diplomatically, why don't you explain your beef? It's very back and forth. And I think part of that is that it's the pilot and it needs to be dramatic. This show is going to be about big speeches and verbal battles. Whereas if it was a novel, I think that conversation would have been a little more nuanced. TV makes everything dial up a bit.
Yeah, and I'm fine with it being conflict. It's just, it seemed like I was maybe meant to understand more than I was. I was unsure what this Q person wanted, and I felt like they were switching or they were not really. It was hard to know the stakes when they were just saying, you're on trial, and I wasn't sure about what were they on trial for and what was the purpose of it. But I think, like you said, it's about he shows up on the bridge without them being prepared, and then later they just transported into this other space. So maybe it's more about just being scared of this person, so they're not doing their best. But
yeah, and Picard has to project all this bravado and confidence so his crew is comfortable, but he has no ability to protect his crew, so he's in this really weird position. So when Worf pulls out his phaser, he's like, "Are you planning to shoot the view screen, Lieutenant?" He's trying to keep everyone dialed down a little bit because there's nothing they could do. Originally, what may be why Q seems so capricious and jumps from one thing to the next is because he was originally developed as multiple entities, all calling themselves Q. So when he turns into the Marine, that might have been intended to be a different person. But they changed that before they made the show. So, but I wonder if some of that lingers.
Yeah, they could be.
Because as soon as Picard is like facts and like, you know, all this, he's like, oh, a trial. Sure, we can do a trial. Like he's just up for anything. He's just playing games.
Yeah.
And that definitely continues throughout the course of Star Trek as a franchise.
But why does he care? Like, why is he so concerned about humans passing some trial? I guess that's maybe part of the mystery.
I don't know if we ever find out. I think he's conceived as a godlike entity, and godlike entities trying to understand humans is a classic trope across sci-fi and fantasy and mythology, but it was very popular in the original Trek. I mean, there were like at least 10 different godlike deities they come across.
Yeah. And I think that's maybe also a sign of the time, like with this time as well, that they have this entity that they meet and it's so concerned with these humans, you know, wanting to, even if it's antagonistic, it still gets this idea that humans are really important and that they matter a lot and, you know, have a lot of importance, I suppose. And so it's a little bit human-centric in that sense, you know, which of course stories will be when they are, I mean, from our perspective, it's always going to be human-centric, but you know that maybe for me, I get a little bit more, I don't take for granted that they would care. So then I'm wondering, like, why do you care? You know?
Yeah. What did you think of the post-atomic horror?
It was funny.
He floats in on a hover chair or whatever.
The first thing that we introduced is, you know, he shows these historical figures, and one of the figures is dressed in sort of black mattresses, it looks like. And that's when
the drug sniffing tube thing.
Yeah, true. And that one you at that point you don't know what it's for, but then you learn that this is part of that time that they had these creatures, or I guess these costumes. It felt, I was confused, you know, because it felt like a little bit racist, but I wasn't sure because I was confused about like, what are these people and why are they dressed like this? Why they look like this, you know?
So this is my main criticism with this part of the episode is that they threw up all people of Earth and then like dropped the colander, and those are the people they put in the stands, right? Like most of them seem like Americans, probably because they're American actors, but like the people they chose are meant to make us go, oh, that's strange. Like we're watching a circus. Like there was a really large obese guy. There's a little person with a Fu Manchu mustache. Like there's a older lady with like blonde dreads practically. Like they made a nonsense place and claimed this is what's gonna be like after World War III. So yeah, I wasn't crazy about that part.
No, I agree, but I don't know, maybe it could be that this is the Q version, that he has made something that was very strange and exaggerated. But I also got this idea, like you said, that this is somehow the people, these are how the people looked like, maybe because of the idea that it's like so much radiation and people would like mutate and look like different shapes and stuff.
I don't know when the idea of World War III came into the Star Trek canon. I don't know if it was an original series thing or the movies, or if this was its first appearance, but they came up with it, I think, to justify how humans became more enlightened and evolved and became a united Earth and all this. Because if we discovered that we destroyed our planet and killed a third of our citizens, after that, we're going to become better. This is a lot of, like, Harlan Ellison criticized Star Trek for being a place where humans are better than they are now, morally. Whereas Doctor Who shows us, you know, in 5,000 years, there's an empire, like, you know, because it's more realistic, I guess, in that sense.
do you think that this was part of, because in this episode they show, for example, the Nazi uniform, and it's like very well known to Picard and I suppose the others too. And I wonder, is that then this idea of the World War III, maybe that is because of the first two world wars and their legacy, that I think that people have this, especially historically, I feel like people have had this idea that, okay, we had these two world wars and that is, we learned so much lessons from them. So that made us better.
Yes. Okay. So in 87, when this came out, there was this idea that we don't do colonialism anymore because of World War I, and we don't do fascism anymore because of World War II. So maybe we won't do racism and nuclear weapons anymore because of World War III.
Yeah, I think so. Something like that, that it came to a head, maybe some different cultural stuff. And there are a lot of things that came out of the world wars. Like, for example, the UN, it was not because of the world wars, but it was like, it came partly, it started before the Second World War, but then it was also, developed more. So I could see that maybe the idea that these world wars becomes an incentive to be more united and to prevent further world wars. So,
I mean, it would be great. I don't want to go through that, but I mean, it's nice to live in the Star Trek universe where we get to live in the happy aftermath.
Yeah.
This part is very important to the history of Star Trek, is the legal business. It's very interesting that the very first episode has Picard doing legal stuff, because he does it all throughout this series and even future series. So I wanted to get this one little quote here.
I recognize this court system as the one that agreed with that line from Shakespeare. Kill all the lawyers.
Kill all the lawyers.
Yeah, he talks about some kind of court ruling. I think he said 2038, that he said that people could not be trialed for, what was it now? It was like they could not be trialed for the crimes of their species or something like that.
Yes. And then Q rejoins that this is 2076, where, legal tricks aren't allowed. Yeah. It feels quaint now that we're in this moment, at least in the States, where everything's up in the air. Like the president is flirting with not doing anything the courts say. And now he's suing the courts for something, which seems like odd if he's going to say the courts don't matter. So maybe we're okay for now. But anyway, it feels a little, I don't know, rose-colored glasses looking back at this time, that you can just give a good legal argument in a speech and you can solve things.
Yeah, I assume that's also part of the sort of utopian vibe, the way that you could reason or, puzzle things out.
Yeah. So they test Picard, like Q wants him to go on this mission and solve the problem. He's always like jogging his elbow, like, get on it, solve the problem. What did you think of the mystery of the episode?
The way that you explained it, it felt a little bit strange in hindsight, but I liked it. The way, maybe I didn't like the planet that much, because it felt like it was, like you said, it was a little bit strange. Like, are they supposed to be aliens? They live in this kind of cave-like buildings. It was a little bit confusing about how, what kind of technology do they have? But I liked the overall that they, when they revealed the mystery, with them big jellyfish, I think that was fun.
Yeah, lovely little jellyfish.
Yeah.
It's not the first time we'll see a life form that needs to be saved from humans or human-like aliens.
Mm.
And I think it happened in the old series once or twice as well. The person who created the story, Dorothy Fontana, was a big part of the original series. So she was probably drawing on some of those old tropes.
I like it as a story device, the way that just trying to free different creatures, and also respect their autonomy, I suppose. But I wasn't sure why Picard, he said that it was its mate. I don't know. How did he know that?
It was its mate. Yes. Well, it's sort of a gender essentialist. Maybe Picard's a real shipper, like me. He's just shipping two aliens together. It could have been mom and son, mom and daughter, dad and, uncle and nephew. We don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they were old college buddies.
Yeah, it could be. Because it felt like he was like, oh, okay, it's coming for this other, jellyfish. And then it was like he had this realization, like, oh, it's his mate. I was like, oh, what are you basing that? But I think you're right. He's just assuming this.
How did you feel about Troy's experience of emotions and her portrayal of the being's emotions?
I liked it. I think that's one of the things maybe that you fall into a little bit, that this has been done a lot. So it doesn't feel like so interesting, but it didn't feel weird in any way. It just for me, it felt fairly normal, I suppose. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is how it works. This is how she would react if she's like this empath. I guess she says that she has some telepathic, but it's more like an empath thing, right?
Yeah, when they first meet with Groppler Zorn, she's like, I'm half Betazoid. I experience emotions, but not mind reading.
Yeah.
She's like, pain, terrible pain, and loneliness. Apparently she was putting on this accent. There's less of it in the later seasons, I guess. She's sort of like an ordinary English person in her regular accent. So I don't know if she was doing Greek or like what it's supposed to be, but it wasn't her original accent.
Maybe the fan theory could be that she is taking on the accent of this jellyfish.
I thought you were going to say humans. Yeah, she's become more like the jellyfish in later seasons.
Yeah, when she's, channeling their emotions, this is going to be like, this is the accent of the jellyfish.
I really love it's right near the end of the episode where she has her last little bit.
Sir? It's wonderful. A feeling of great joy and gratitude. Great joy and gratitude.
Oh, that's so nice. I love Troy. She even gets into some of the later, I think the last season of the Picard TV show.
The same actor?
Yeah. So there's this thing about Star Trek. You'll notice it as time goes by, but they all have to be thin. I think because they're in the military, like it's just, so the only actors they bring back are the ones that didn't get fat. Except for maybe like Riker, but he's also a great director, so he's around anyway, so they bring him in. But like, yeah, so Troy, she's keeping it tight, so she gets to come back. Whereas Catherine Mulgrew, who plays Janeway, has not kept it that skinny, so she just does voiceover. I swear that I'm almost positive this is why.
Yeah, I mean, it could very well be. But is the idea then I mean, couldn't they just be retired and be like, okay, I am not this, or they always come back as they're working?
Oh, I'm just thinking about the actors that are still working. Like LeVar Burton, for example, is in that season of Picard, and he still does things here and there.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant that they kind of visited as like guest stars, and I thought maybe they could be just dropping by on a planet and like, oh, this person is here. But you're saying they're still on the ship, then they would have to. They would say that they would have to be like military fit still.
Yeah. If they go up to a high enough rank, they get to let themselves go a little bit. Like Geordi in the end of Picard, he's a Commodore, I think. He runs a space station. So he gets to like, eat a little bit more than the average person. I just can't imagine being a 65, 75-year-old person still like working out all the time to like, I don't know. It would drive me nuts.
And especially if you're on a spaceship, there's no place to run or anything. I guess the holodeck, but it doesn't seem that large that you can just run around.
Yeah. Well, and in these days, like running on a studio, like it wasn't as, I don't know, you look at older shows when people run, if they're in the studio, it's like they're running 10 feet. It doesn't look realistic at all. I heard that that thing called what is it called? The virtual wall, where they do all the visual effects ahead of time and they project it around the actors as they act. Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
Some are starting to implement treadmills so that they can run convincingly while inside that environment.
Yeah.
Anything to avoid going on location, apparently.
I mean, it could work in some sense, but imagine how specific it would have to be. You couldn't just run to a specific spot. You would just have to run generally, very like forward. So then.
Yeah, the treadmill, I feel like, would have to be able to turn. So you could, like most of the time running in an actual dangerous situation, you're bobbing and weaving, ducking behind things.
Yeah, it would be difficult.
What did you think about the latent horniness? This is a Roddenberry quality that he infuses in Star Trek. Is there's not a lot of like dating, but there's a lot of like horny looks. Like the ensign that shows Riker how to use the wall screen. As he leaves, she like looks at his ass and smiles.
I noticed some of it, but it was also difficult to say. I think there was more with the main characters because I was trying to figure out like, are they horny or are they just having other, but I didn't really think about it with other characters, to be honest, but I will keep a lookout for it.
When Riker met Dr. Crusher and Wes on that planet, he's like being real chatty at first. And you get this look on his face. I took a screenshot. It was hilarious. Him just going like, yeah. And then Wes is like, Mom doesn't date much or something to that effect. She's really focused on her work. So like Wes is trying to wingman for his mom. It was very odd.
Yeah.
The fraternization on Star Trek is also like wildly inappropriate. In relation to like any military force, like people are dating each other, whether they're subordinates or yeah. Let's see. Did I have any other interesting insights? Data and Riker shoot the field and dude falls. The ship starts charging. Oh, so when that big ship arrives and it starts shooting, what did you think of the effects of the like laser blasts and the like blowing up buildings and all that stuff?
I think it was fine. It was I think that the buildings, on that set, that part is a little bit bothering me, but the blowing up was not. I didn't really have a problem with that specifically. What did you think?
Well, that overhead view when you get the houses from the outside and everything's just the same shade of brown and they're like lumpy and badly, like somebody just got some Play-Doh and like that's original. They didn't touch that up at all. Whereas Farpoint Station looks like cleaner, and I don't know, maybe that was intentional.
Yeah, maybe
it
could be that
difference.
Yeah, that they had a kind of a primitive civilization. So how did they make all of this cloth and apples and stuff?
From a modern perspective, I would say that it's a bit Orientalist or, I don't know, racist generally to make this indigenous society look so dumpy and like backward so that we're like, how is their station so awesome? You know, like it
Maybe
must be an alien. But that's a thing we were doing a ton back then. The ancient aliens, like aliens made the pyramids, you know?
Yeah. And I don't think it necessarily have to be, but I do think it was a lot of Oriental themes. It was like this in the way that the climate is portrayed and stuff, and it feels like kind of Middle Eastern. So then it does bring into that you could have had something that was just like a rundown Western town or something. You don't have to make it more Middle Eastern.
Yeah. They did do a Western town in a Star Trek episode called Spectre of the Gun. I highly recommend it. It is, do you know what a psych is?
No, I don't
It's
think so.
basically like a big backdrop that's just one color. So the sky outside this town is all red. And like the theme of that episode is violence inherent in humanity. It's good. Chekhov gets shot. Spoiler alert. There's this great moment with Data when they're down in the tunnels. I wanted to play this. Troy is feeling these emotions, you know. She's really getting worked up, so Data and Riker come over to see what's up.
Sorry, sir. You seem to be commenting on everything.
Good. Don't stop, my friend.
I don't know what that means. Like, is Data... It makes me think he's always doing this. He's always studying his own meta conversation, like trying to become human. You know what I mean? Like, because like if you started mansplaining or whatever, you'd notice by people's looks that they're like, yeah, we know this already or whatever. So I think that's what he's doing there. But yeah, it was interesting.
I wasn't sure. Yeah, I thought also I noticed this too, but I also wasn't sure about it. But it felt like he was surprised about it, that it's not something that he normally does, but it could be, like you said, that he's conscious that this is something that he does, and then he's trying to, again, bring it back in. But it felt like it was just like, wait, why am I commenting so much?
It was the kind of thing, as an autistic person, I probably have said many times is like, sorry, I'm taking over the conversation, you know, but I'm human, full of all these insecurities and emotions, whereas I believe Data is intended not to have any. So apparently that's a thing that's really common in season 1 is where exactly are his emotions? Oh, yeah. Just before we started, I was looking at Reddit and I saw somebody had an interesting idea, which is that Data doesn't not have emotions. He has android emotions, which are unfathomable to humans, that they're very different.
I mean, he would have to have some emotions because it says that he wants to be human. So he has some kind of urge. What would that be in that case, if not emotion?
He's programmed to have curiosity. And he sees that imagination is a fundamental capacity of humans. So maybe he's curious to get that. But to make the leap from that to I want to be human, it seems like a huge gulf.
Yeah. And I also think that maybe it depends on how you put it. But I think I want this. That means that you have some kind of emotion about it.
Yeah.
if there was no emotion, they wouldn't have any wants. The emotions is what tells us what is important to us. In that case, he would have had to said something like, "Oh, my programming tells me that I'm supposed to pursue being human," or like maybe that's what he meant. That just he uses wants because humans will understand it. But this is always a question. I don't really think that when it doesn't really make sense to me that to have a character that doesn't have emotions, because emotions is a way of processing information. It's not separate from thinking.
Right. If you could copy a human so exactly as to have thoughts that are similar to ours, surely emotions isn't that much of a leap. Which hold that thought, we do meet electronic life forms with emotions in the future. So it's they're setting up what they want Data's arc to be, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he couldn't have had emotions. That's just how he was designed.
Yeah, but I think that it doesn't make sense to me that it would be no emotions. I think that's just a simplification of the time, and I think that like the way that it's portrayed, it's not a separation, like when we think, we're not doing like, now I'm being logical, now I'm being emotional. Like the logic is informed by emotions, because we have to know what it is that we want and what is desirable and what is not desirable. And that is emotions that is telling us that.
Yeah, in especially in TV, maybe not as much in books, but in TV, half of what we're doing when we're watching it is getting emotions, getting our feelings played with, whether it's the music or the scenarios. So anytime a show tries to give us a character that doesn't have emotions, it's like a big risk, right? Like Spock in the original series is meant to be sort of suppresses all emotion, but they would find 1,000 different ways to make them come out, whether he's, various sci-fi jiggery pokery, because it's more interesting. Like we latch on to emotional displays. So yeah, it's attention, because if they're completely emotionless, they're boring to watch. And actors don't want to be boring, directors don't want things to be boring. So it's,
and you need the characters to want things and to care about things. And then if it's only like logic, then it's not we are not invested in them. But I think that there's the idea to have this character is the kind of robot becoming human. That is the trope, right? Because it's more satisfying if someone is all emotion. No, if someone is all logic, and then at some point they're like, "Oh, now I feel emotion." Then it's like more, more satisfying, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. The thing that I found interesting is when the creature starts shooting the city, and Picard's like, target them with phasers, and Q shows up.
Get off my bridge!
Sorry, I just love that. But anyway, Q's like, yeah, you go right to the guns. And what are we supposed to do in these situations, right? If somebody's shooting innocent people and we have guns, right, aren't we like duty bound to meet force with force? And Q puts him in this impossible situation. And this Q does this all the fucking time, like makes you go all the way to the edge to prove that humans are bad. And Picard finds some way out of it. Any other thoughts that stuck out for you here?
Not really. I think I have some general thoughts about how the ship works and all of these things, but I think it's done a good job of setting up a lot of different things, and they don't really answer everything. They don't go into how are things working in practice, but it's mostly those kind of questions, and I think that will be explored throughout.
Yeah. We're going to see Picard try to find a third way to avoid violence. That's a huge part of Star Trek. We're going to see everybody working together to solve problems. Lots of talking in comfortable carpeted rooms. What else? People learning how to get along better. And Troy feeling intense emotions. I think, keep an eye on these different themes. And if you want Picard and Crusher to get together, you're going to have to wait a long time. There's a great episode in season 7 where they are handcuffed together. The sexual tension is intense.
Is that part of the... Sorry, I just wanted to comment on that. It is that it feels like also this kind of TV show trope that, people cannot get together. They have to always be having this tension of potentially getting together. So maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, it's up to the fic writers to put Kirk and Spock in a room together, or Crusher and Picard, or even Riker and Troy, right? Who deeply love each other, but they focus on their work and because that stuff's boring, right? A happy, comfortable relationship is boring for TV viewers, so they just dangle it in front of me for years.
I think that's a general idea. I don't know that I agree. I think that you could make it interesting, because if you think about it, so many people are in relationships, and it's not like their story is done just because they are in a relationship and then there's no conflict anymore,
Yeah. I'm trying to think any newer shows. I feel like most relationships on Star Trek are fraught and are constantly being disrupted by explosions. But yeah, there might be shows where they do it well. I just can't think of any.
But I could think of some shows where there is actually couples in them. I will get back to you.
Yeah, listener, tell us your favorite TV couples and how they're doing. Send us an email at greatandsecretknowledge@gmail.com. We have a Discord. Check out that link in the show notes. And help us make the show, suggest topics, guests, all that stuff. We'll have social media eventually at some point. So let's get to our most important thing, which is Sophia. How did you like the episode? Would you watch another one? Go.
Yeah, I liked it. And I'm interested to watch another. But we would have to look up maybe what would make sense, because do we want to do each episode, throughout? Maybe I would get tired of it before. Maybe we should do the highlights. We'll have to talk about it off podcast.
The next episode is pretty terrible, but in a fun, entertaining way. It's called The Naked Now. It's this episode where the characters are acting totally out of character, which isn't that interesting if you don't know the characters very well. So I don't know why they made it the second episode and not the 15th. But anyway, that one's fun. There's a few after that are fucking just not watchable. But yeah, we can, listener, if you want us to watch a specific episode, let us know. And we'll take it from there. Thank you very much, Sophia. I can't wait to watch more Star Trek and talk about it with you.
Yeah, thank you. Ha det bra.
Let's see what's out there. Engage.
All right. Thanks for listening. Bye.
A huge thanks to James Lark of jameslark.co.uk for providing our wonderful theme song. Thank you, James.
Troy's thighs. I took note. It's not important whatsoever. Oh, I've been single for 6 years. Give me a break.
You don't have to take my word for it. But you don't have to take my word for it. But you don't have to take my word for it. But you don't have to take my word for it. But you don't have to take my word for it. But you don't have to take my word for it. But you don't have to take my word for it.